right, let's listen to today's broadcast as I interview Mike around the world. We get some information about the plane crash in France and how it might have been related to the CERN.
Hey, Pastor, how you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great. How you doing, Mike?
I am hanging in there.
All right. So, Mike, I could ask you 100 questions. You've heard me all day. If you've been listening the last hour or two, especially the first hour and part of the second. Obviously, I got a lot of questions. First of all, can you tell me what this contractor does, that this one American lady, what's up with this contractor? Do you know?
Well, they work for the NGA, Geospatial Intel Agency, and that's the acronym for that, NGA. And they're responsible for part of defense in way of seeing beyond what the enemy can see. So they, in a sense, map the world. And because the enemy is always covering up things, they can look at the surface of the world and beyond, into the earth. So that's what they're responsible for.
Well, that's pretty powerful, lethal information. I mean, if they're involved in the scouring, surveillance, if you will, intelligence of the world to keep track of where every Russian sub and where every Russian vessel and every Iranian silo. I mean, when you're talking about something of what are the Chinese doing, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, they are the eyes, essentially, of the DoD and other entities, and they work also with the geoengineering teams. So it's a very vast agency, one that's normally unspoken. Right.
So there's no question, though. Just like in the missing Malaysia plane with the 20 people who work for, Free Scales Unlimited, and those 20 were working for a company that makes the semiconductors defense contracts. To have this individual on this plane I'm not saying this is the cause and the reason the plane was blew up, and I have no idea how it blew up or did it blow up or why it wrecked, but obviously you have to raise your eyebrow and question it, and you need more info on that. What in the world did she do, and what did they know, and where was she going? She's going to Germany. And then what about these two Iranian journalists? I mean, is there any, what's up with that?
Right, their manifests, of course, that was delayed, but that plane picked up some speed coming down. It was at somewhere around 38,000 feet, which puts it at a descent rate for its vertical speed was about, I would estimate, 1,100 to 2,500 feet per minute. But it was increasing speed as it did descend. So it began likely as a slow descent, and it increased its rate of descent the closer it got to the ground, which tells me, just by guessing, I'm not giving anything officially, I'll let them handle that, but somehow the electronics in the plane were disturbed. So you're looking at a slow descent initially at about 1,100 feet per minute, but then that would increase the speed at which a plane would incinerate. You're looking at incineration levels of a plane have to be above 800-900 miles an hour. It will begin to disintegrate. It begins to vibrate and shake itself apart. Now, if it shook itself apart before it hit the earth, that's why there was no explosion.
Okay, that makes sense.
A380s, A320s, they will incinerate above. They begin to vibrate. They reach a maximum of their structural integrity at a certain speed, and at that point, it'll begin to break apart.
Okay, and that would explain why there was no explosion. But okay, and I agree with you on that. But apparently, it broke apart. If that's the case, just before impact, because the debris field is not, it's several hundred yards, but it's contained in a close enough area that if it broke apart before impact, it was just before impact, or not long. Would you agree?
Yeah, I'd say it started, if it was on a downward spiral and the vector placed it into one specific part on the Earth, if it began to shake apart, the shards would not go outside of that descent vector. And so all those particles and shards would only fragment further. But my key thing is, why in the world would there be no radio contact? As it was at 38,000 feet, they had time to talk on the radios unless something electronic, a severe electronic failure.
So let's talk about
must
that.
have taken place.
All right, so now that leads me to question number 4. Hang on a second. Question number 3, before I get to question number 4. I'll ask this one first. Have you ever heard of 3 world leaders going to a crash site by the next day?
No.
Is this highly
In fact,
unusual?
normally no world leaders
Ever.
will go to a crash site.
Never will a world leader ever go to a crash site, especially as difficult as this crash site is. So don't you find this very, very strange?
Yeah, also, we have to keep in mind that France is the one with the airspace issues with the drones. So we can't forget that either. They have been inundated with drones and Russian bombers flying into their airspace.
So the president of France, the president of Spain, and Chancellor Angela Merkel of Germany all arrived together to the crash site. You wonder what was... I know it's a terrible scene, but again, never has happened before that any time as a world leader go to a crash site, let alone 3. And the fact that there's an American employee of the Geoparticle Intelligence Agency, a contractor that works for the Pentagon, a high-level individual that happened to be on that flight, and who knows what all she had with her or what all was there. But that's another question. We'll get to that in a minute. But first, this is the question that I think what you brought up a minute ago, and that everyone is, why in the world, and I'm going to ask you about the CERN in a minute, but why in the world would a plane descend 18 minutes and no distress call, no conversation, no mayday, mayday? How in the world could that happen, Mike?
The electronics must have been fried. I mean, they lost radar contact at I believe it was around 10:45 their time, and that was the end of that. So
let me ask you.
That's a mystery.
Okay.
Those aircraft have backup systems. They have backup systems for the backup systems. And for communications to fail, that's just unheard of. So something electronic happened pretty bad in that aircraft. I would suggest it could be a number of things, but in order for them not to make contact, they would either have to have been forced not to make contact, or they just simply couldn't.
Now, Mike, next question. What could fry every instrument on a plane? Let me ask you a question. Is there a weapon? Well, I don't want you to answer something that is classified. But let me ask this question. Is it theoretically possible that something could have fried these outside of the plane, just having a short circuit in the plane? I mean, is there a possibility that something else could have interfered? Could the CERN even interfered?
Yeah, you know what? What short-circuited on CERN were the magnets.
90 seconds.
Think of the protons as the water going through a pipe. That pipe are the magnets that hold the protons in place. If the pipe is punctured or the magnets break down, the protons are no longer contained, and they can fly out in one direction because they're guided by the magnet. So if there's a magnetic breach, well, then protons can fly in any given direction, anywhere.
60
go right through
seconds.
walls and everything else because they're traveling at very high speed and with it's just more than one proton, so it could let out a beam right into the atmosphere, and highly charged protons stripped of their electrons would cause somewhat of a pulse of energy to hit something like an EMP, and then but it would be very confined, maybe in the space of about 30 meters, about a 30-meter area going all the way up through the atmosphere. The magnetics on CERN are very powerful. They're about 100,000 times more powerful than the Earth's magnetic field, so they're extremely powerful.
Gee.
They're super cool because they get extremely hot, and the process of repairing CERN now, which, by the way, I kind of forecasted this issue, so did quite a few others, because this is one thing I talked about was once they had a breakdown, they're going to recover from this because they're using untested types of magnets. But when they recover from this, they're going to double up on everything. They have to heat up the magnets and then super cool them. That process could take a couple days to a week to a month. But they will get them back online. But if the magnet containment system fails, those protons traveling at incredible speeds can fly out in any direction with no containment. And because they are directed, then you're looking at a particle beam weapon. In fact, that's what a particle beam weapon actually does.
So when we talked about last week, the fact that CERN could be, when I read in Revelation about the red horseman of the apocalypse and how that he'll be given a great sword or a great weapon, CERN could be used, or could be eventually the technology of CERN, maybe what this becomes, a great weapon that can shoot planes down by frying them anytime it wants to, anywhere in the world. I don't know. There's a lot of these. There's 72 of these facilities. They don't all have this much power as this one, but obviously this is a new technology, a new instrument that could be used for warfare. I got another question, and that is, someone just posted a minute ago, the second black box has been found. The first black box was found yesterday. They say it is unusable. It don't work. Now they're saying a second black box has been found, but they've just announced that it's missing a chip in it, so they can't recover information from it. Missing a chip. Now that was just posted a minute ago. They say somebody by the name of Steve, that Steve has a link on this. So what do they mean by a chip is missing? Have you ever heard of such a thing, Mike?
Yes, actually, yes. They do have the voice portion. They have the voice recorder. The flight recorder simply records the mechanics or the data of the aircraft itself. But there's a voice recorder also, and they can recreate the file from that voice recording, and they're working on that now so that they can extract the voices from that. As far as the data from the aircraft, without the chip, you can't extract all the files to reassimilate what happened. And so it's essentially dead data, or would take a long time in order for it to be usable. But they do have a voice file. They have a voice file. And so it's a complete voice file. Now they'll comb through that voice file to see what they can hear, since they can't retrieve actual flight data.